All right, Cucks. Like I said last video, I'm going to compare a wrestler from the Attitude Era to a wrestler from today to make some very staggering points. The points are not going to be about the level of wrestler. Oftentimes, people focus on that. They're like, Stone Cold was better than Roman Reigns. Yes, that's obviously true, right? The Rock was better than Roman Reigns and probably better than Stone Cold by, in my opinion, quite a bit. That's also true, but that's neither here nor there. We all know that to be a fact, right? That's fine. But let's talk about mid-carders, right? Let's talk about not the actual wrestler themselves, because a lot of wrestlers today are good wrestlers, right? Like, Miro is a good wrestler in terms of, like, the things that he can do in the ring are not better or worse than what, let's say, the Godfather could do in the ring, right? They're not better and they're not worse, you know? But it's the way that they're booked, and it's the general storytelling. These are two themes that will become more prominent in my videos. General storytelling and booking / character development, right? Because character development and character is a complete function of how booking works with the character, right? Some characters can be booked in certain ways and others cannot, right? And that's what I'm going to get here. So we're going to talk about two wrestlers. We're going to talk about Miro. I just picked that up right now. Miro. And we're going to talk about not Godfather, not D'Lo, but we're going to talk about one of my favorite Attitude Era mid-carders, right? Val Venis. Here's why we're going to talk about Val Venis. Because Val Venis captures everything that was good about the Attitude Era and some of the things that were bad about the Attitude Era. So, for example, the amount of sexuality on TV was a bit too much in the sense of, like, does this guy really need to have a gimmick of being a porn star? No, he doesn't. He could have been a ladies' man, right? He could have been a lot of other things, but porn star had more shock value, but also it was incorporated very well into his character. Now, let's compare him to Miro and Miro's current gimmick of the Redeemer. Now, what is the Redeemer? Nobody fucking knows. He's just a guy that likes to talk to God. It's basically Mordecai, but without any of the actual production value of Mordecai. It's just Miro, who now believes in God a lot, and that's his gimmick. Fine. You know what I'm saying? Fine. Could be worse. I agree. But it could also be better. Now let's look at Val Venis. Who is Val Venis? Val Venis, he has a name where the last name is Venus, which rhymes with penis, right? So immediately when we think of Val Venis, you know, and porn star, you're triggered into thinking penis. That was the conceptualization behind the name. So we've established already that the name Val Venis and the gimmick go hand in hand, right? Val Venis is supposed to be his porn name, basically, right? He's supposed to be the big Valboski, right? Now, with that being said, how does Val Venis come into the ring? What are his mannerisms? What is his character in terms of a physical standpoint? He's obviously a guy that's in incredibly good shape, right? So is Miro. Now, how does Miro speak? He's a Bulgarian immigrant who speaks pretty good English, I'm not going to lie, with a Bulgarian accent and talks about God. Now, Bulgarians are pretty religious. I run with a few Bulgarians, motherfuckers, and they're pretty religious people, you know? So that right there checks the box, right? But that's not really part of his gimmick because he's not a Bulgarian anymore. Now he's just Miro. He's just Miro. He's not the Bulgarian brute. He's not Rusev. You know, he's just Miro. So he's just a guy who's religious. Now let's look at Val Venis, right? Val Venis is a guy who comes out wearing a towel, right, to hide his massive prick, you know? And he talks directly to the women. His target demographic is the women. This is highlighted, pinpointed, and elaborated upon every time Val Venis cuts a promo, right? What are his promos like? He talks about how he's good in bed and how every woman wants to sleep with him, right? He's funny, he's hilarious, he's charismatic. Miro is also charismatic in his own right, but his promos are boring, repetitive, and are meant to be taken seriously because Val Venis' promos were also repetitive. He'd say, hello, ladies, you know, and then he'd make a pun about where they are or something, you know, or he'd say something like, I came, I saw, and then I came again. You know what I'm saying? Which leads me to the other part. Val Venis' voice. He has the voice of a lecherous individual, right? Val Venis is supposed to be this sleazy guy who likes to fuck broads, right? So he talks like that, motherfucks. So he talks like that. So, Val Venis is a complete character. Is it the best character of all time? No. But it's a good character, and it makes him interesting. Miro's character has none of these nuances, right? The only thing that Miro does is he talks about God. He doesn't dress like someone that is super religious. His theme song is not particularly super religious, right? His moveset does not have him like praying or anything like that. His mannerisms, his in-ring mannerisms don't have that. Val Venis would gyrate his hips, right? Because he was a porn star, because that's who he is. Like, imagine if a porn star became a wrestler. they would behave in the most exaggerated version of themselves as Val Venis. If a religious person came and became a wrestler, they would not behave like Miro in their most exaggerated version. They would behave like Mordecai, right? They would be this overly religious guy who everything they do is about religion. It's about their character. Now, how, this is probably the most important part of this video, and the most important part of the distinction I'm trying to put over here, right? How is Miro's gimmick relevant in the way that he is booked? Thus far, motherfucks, it's completely irrelevant. If Miro's gimmick, and here's how we know this, if Miro's gimmick was that he likes designer shoes, or that he likes video games like it was, everything that he has done would be happening exactly the same way. He wouldn't be getting mad at someone because God told him to. He'd be getting mad because they stepped on his shoe, which would be, in my opinion, more compelling. Because at least you can be like, oh, okay, this guy likes shoes. The guy stepped on his shoes, so he attacked him, right? Within the context of this character, it makes sense. Nothing about Miro being religious and being the Redeemer is relevant to the way that he is booked in matches or to the storylines that he's being put in. His storylines are he's destroying Fuego del Sol because Fuego del Sol is not good enough until Sammy Guevara beats him for the title. That has nothing to do at all, motherfucks, nothing to do at all with him being the Redeemer. The same thing would happen the exact same way if he were Miro, the shoe guy, right? Now, let's look at Val Venis, and let's look at 3 really quick storylines that Val Venis was part of that I remember off the top of my head. First of all, he banged Mr. Fuji's wife or whatever, right? He banged that Japanese woman, right? And Mr. Fuji and Kaientai wanted to get revenge, so they threatened to cut off his dick. Now, is this a juvenile storyline? Of course, motherfucks. It's an Attitude Era, lowbrow, trailer trash storyline, right? Did it have undertones of, I don't want to say racism, but there was definitely a racial element here, right? The implications being that Mr. Fuji and the rest of Kaientai were jealous of Val Venis' masculinity and his massive penis, so they wanted to cut him off. Now, this is not because they were Japanese and Asians stereotypically are supposed to have small penises, but that was the underpinning of it. And that's not good, all right? That doesn't help anybody. Did it make it funnier? Sometimes, right? Also, in the gimmick, was the fact that the honorable Japanese, right, even though they were the heels kind of, right, there is honor in Japan, right? They care about being offended and things like that. So they were going to pretty much harakiri his penis off, right? That was the philosophy behind the angle. And Val Venis, by virtue of being a porn star, doesn't want his dick to be cut off. No man wants his dick to be cut off, right? But especially Val Venis doesn't want his dick to be cut off because that's his livelihood and that's where all of his confidence comes from in terms of kayfabe, right? So that's one storyline. Let's move on to one of my favorite mid-card storylines that I talk about all the time. I think it was WrestleMania 14. I could be wrong. Goldust versus Val Venis fighting because Val Venis banged Terry Runnels. You see how all Val Venis' storylines involve him banging broads? That's relevant because he's a porn star, right? That's what he brings to the table. You know, if someone was getting weird, they might go be with Goldust. But if someone wanted to get laid, they'd go to Val Venis, right? Goldust wins the match and doesn't win his wife back because she turned on him. But he wins the match and gets retribution. How does he win the match? He kicks Val Venis right in the balls and rolls him up, right? This is symbolic. This is a way to end the feud. The thing which Val Venis used to ruin Goldust's life is exactly the thing that Goldust targets and hurts him on, right? This is called good booking, good storytelling, and a complete storyline, right? The character of one man, Val Venis, was extremely important to the storyline. The relationship between Terry Runnels and Goldust was extremely important to the storyline. Furthermore, Goldust, being this weirdo cuck, is extremely important to the storyline because he's the opposite of Val Venis. He's like this weird guy who has to paint himself to come out and wrestle. Val Venis is this confident guy who doesn't have to do that, right? And he stole the wife of the lesser guy. So anyone with a heart is cheering for the lesser guy to get some revenge, right? Now, another great storyline going a different direction, right? Val Venis eventually starts getting managed by Trish Stratus and reverts into this normal guy gimmick. The fact that he's a porn star is no longer mentioned. He's just the very athletic and very good wrestler, Val Venis. This leads him to the Intercontinental Championship, well-deserved, right? Shortly thereafter, after a very memorable feud with Rikishi, Val Venis gets approached by Stevie Richards, who has started the Right to Censor. This is incorporated into the storyline. Stevie Richards pretty much says to Val Venis, Val, you were a guy who was a porn star. But it seems that recently you have seen the light. You're no longer wearing the same attire. You cut your hair, right? You're trying to make positive changes. You became the Intercontinental Champion. You're trying to make a better change for yourself, Val. And that's what attracted Val Venis to Right to Censor, amongst other things, right? The point being that his time with Trish Stratus was, even though when they did it, they probably had no actual end game, it was incorporated along with his porn star character into the reason why he joined Right to Censor. He was tired of being a porn star. That life was not fulfilling for him, right? He tried being a normal guy, but that just isn't enough. He needs to take the extra step and make sure that everyone else changes their ways. Same thing with the Good Father, right? Same thing. It works because the Good Father is the Good Father, or was the Godfather, right? He was a pimp, and now he's seen the error of his ways, right? That's the beauty, motherfucks, of that storyline, and why Right to Censor is honestly one of the best stables ever created. Like, no joke, motherfucks. Right to Censor is so underrated. Everyone hated Right to Censor. Everyone. But everyone wanted to see them. You wanted to see Ivory get put through a table by the Dudleys. You wanted to see Stevie Richards, who the best work of his career. You wanted to see Stevie Richards get destroyed because of how annoying he was, right? Val Venis' character is integral to him joining Right to Censor. The only one where it didn't matter was Bull Buchanan, because he was a jobber who was new. He was supposed to be this like corrections officer type guy, and that kind of played into it. But more importantly, he was just new. He was the first recruit. Stevie Richards is an ECW guy. ECW is known for being lewd and lascivious and dirty and all the other shit, and he was changing it up, right? Right to Censor was awesome. But the important takeaway here is Val Venis' character was conducive to him joining Right to Censor. If, for example, Crash Holly joined Right to Censor, it would have no bearing on anything, right? It's just a random gimmick switch for Crash Holly. That's the problem with gimmick switches. They need to happen either within the context of the storyline, or when the character is reintroduced after a long time off, or perhaps when they switch companies. Otherwise, it's going to fail. So now I ask you, let's look at Miro. Let's look at Malachi Black. Let's look at Karrion Kross. It's not just an AEW problem. Karrion Kross, Keith Lee, Mustafa Ali, Cedric Alexander, Buddy Murphy, all these guys. What gimmicks did they have at any point in their career? And how were these gimmicks incorporated into the storytelling, right? If anything, it was the exact opposite. They wanted to incorporate Mustafa Ali's hacker gimmick into the storytelling, but it didn't work. It failed. They mentioned it once, and they're like, we're going to go away with this. Now it's all shut it down, all this stupid shit. That was supposed to be a mega push for someone. I guess Mustafa Ali. It was supposed to be a mega push until it was revealed that all the people in the faction were complete nobodies. Nobody wanted to see any of these guys. So that's what I'm saying. They didn't incorporate it into the gimmick correctly. Let me quickly tell you about another great, memorable feud. Dudley Boys versus TNA and Trish Stratus, right? The storyline was Bubba Ray Dudley would like to put women through tables, and he would get this orgasmic release after he did so, to the point where Devon had to slap him back into reality after every power bomb. He would just lay there with the woman, and like he'd be in this like, glazed state, and then Devon would be like, wake up, and he'd slap him, right? For some reason, the reason was obvious, Bubba Ray liked Trish Stratus, and he refused to put her through a table, breaking the Dudley's MO. This was very bad for the fans of the Dudley Boys, because the fans love to see that kind of shit, right? Trish keeps taunting him. She's wearing lingerie on top of a table, right? Which normally would mean very little, right? Beyond the fact that there's a woman with lingerie on trying to seduce a guy. But she's on top of a table, right? She's teasing him. The implications are that she's really, really turning him on by being on a table, let alone the lingerie. But she's trying to like pretty much tease his ass to blue balls him for life, right? This leads to several instances where Trish Stratus is about to be put to the table. She kisses Bubba Ray. This, quote-unquote, makes Bubba Ray come because he's in that glazed state, right? Allowing Albert to give him the bobble bomb through a table, right? This culminates in a pay-per-view match. TNA win the match because when they're going for the 3D on Albert, right? Bubba Ray gets distracted by Trish. This allows Test to give Devon the big boot and pin his ass. After the match, the Dudley Boys, however, get their comeuppance. Trish tries to kiss Bubba Dudley in order to make him not put her through a table. It doesn't work. Devon get the table. Devon gets the table, sets it up, puts Trish on Bubba Ray. Bubba Ray jumps down, power bomb through the table. The fans lose their shit, right? During the whole match, Bubba Ray is yelling at Trish like, "I'm gonna get you, you little bitch," right? It was great storytelling, but what did it do? It took Trish Stratus' sex appeal and her character of being the sex bomb, right? And incorporated it correctly with the Dudley Boys character, which has nothing to do with that, beyond the fact that Bubba Ray gets sexually aroused when he puts women through tables. They took two concepts and made a storyline out of it. That's what wrestling is. Nowadays, the only storyline you get is dumb shit. Like Cody Rhodes being like, "I'm the number one in this company and I'm gonna beat you." That's the storyline between Cody Rhodes and Malachi Black. Forget this other shit they're doing. Oh, Malachi Black is tormenting Cody. Oh, Rosario Dawson is there. Look out. Nobody cares about any of that. It's very evident what's going on in AEW. It's very evident what's going on Raw. The wrestling product has shifted. And it's not the Attitude Era was, TV 14, because you can do all this without doing that. There's many examples I can rattle off top of my head, motherfucks. The more recent one, Jey Uso and Roman Reigns. I don't think it was carried out well, because in the match they would start crying and talking, which was stupid, right? But the storyline was a PG storyline that had a purpose. Only Roman Reigns and Jey Uso or Jimmy Uso could be in that storyline, right? Roman Reigns cannot tell someone outside his family I'm the head of the table, because they'll look at him and be like, "That's great, bro. Why are you telling me that? I don't give a rat's ass." Right? Trish Stratus couldn't do the same thing to anyone. She had to do it to Bubba Dudley because he was half retarded and he liked tables and putting women through them. The storyline was based specifically on the wrestlers involved in it. I don't think the storyline started by saying, we're going to put Trish Stratus in a program with the Dudleys. They probably thought the Dudleys are not busy right now because someone else is tag team champions. TNA need a good rub. TNA being Test and Albert for all you nerds, right? So they're like, how are we going to do it? We're going to have TNA beat the Dudleys. Then the next question is, what's the storyline? And that's when they came up with this. Today's wrestling is like this. Anthony Ogogo needs some TV time. He's going to attack Cody Rhodes because that's our guy, right? What's the storyline? I don't know. Let's not think of one. Let's not work hard to think of a storyline. But you know what? Anthony Ogogo is British, so let's make that the storyline. That's the problem. It should have been Cody versus QT Marshall. That would have made more sense because there's a storyline. They didn't explore that really at all. That thing was it came and went. AEW has flashes of good storylines sometimes, like the Pentagon versus Cody Rhodes storyline, which lasted 2 episodes, right? That could have been an epic feud if they did it correctly, right? Eddie Kingston versus Pac could have been an epic feud when Pac came back. They didn't do it like that. They just had Pentagon and the other one leave Eddie Kingston. You see what I'm saying? Epic feuds can only happen when the right characters are put together, and more importantly, when the right story is built around these characters, right? There's plenty of times in the Attitude Era when this wasn't really explored that well. Typically in championship matches, right? Like, a lot of people like the Booker T Stone Cold segments. I didn't really like them. Oh, Stone Cold's beating him up in the grocery store. I thought it was a little disrespectful to Booker T, but that's neither here nor there. That didn't really have a storyline because it was part of a greater concept of the invasion storyline. So I guess it's excusable to some extent. But everything else had a storyline, right? Dean Malenko, as light heavyweight champion, fighting Lita because he's a ladies' man and he wants to sleep with Lita, and she's good enough to wrestle dudes and maybe can beat him for the light heavyweight title, was a great storyline, right? It was memorable. We still talk about it, me and my friends, right? Eddie Guerrero in China that I mentioned a few weeks ago. Great angle. The whole thing made sense. You take Eddie Guerrero, who's this like goofy but fun and charming and charismatic Latino guy, right? And he's all about the Latino heat. You know, he's supposed to be like this like sexual dude who's like really romantic and like really cool. And he's able to get China, even though they're enemies at first, right? And he's like, mamacita. He's like, I can't wait to wrestle you and touch your body, right? So he goes from like lecherous Latino stereotype to like romantic Latino stereotype to the point where he's able to then start dating China, who up until that point was this super serious character. China was supposed to be this badass like bodyguard type, right? She wasn't gonna date a guy, let alone a guy that's shorter than her, right? You know, that was part of the comedy, how much smaller Eddie Guerrero is to China, right? And they would come out, mamacita, right? With the flowers, and China would come out in a gown, and she'd have the flowers, and then for a while they had a pipe in the flowers so they could cheat in matches. You know, they were awesome, right? This then evolved into Eddie Guerrero becoming an abusive boyfriend, right? Eddie Guerrero dating China for like a week and becoming an abusive boyfriend would make no sense, right? Unless you had the foundation of who Eddie Guerrero and China were for years, motherfucks. For years, back to the days of DX when China was the silent bodyguard, right? Without that, Eddie Guerrero abusing her and then Billy Gunn coming to save her, none of these things would make sense. But in the context of wrestling, they did make sense. Because Billy Gunn is supposed to be a good friend of China's. He's a big, strong guy. Eddie Guerrero is small and obviously not nearly as strong as Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn was being repackaged as like they were hoping to make him a mid-carder, maybe main eventer at that point, and when he was the one Billy Gunn, right? He was being repackaged. It was a good story. It made sense. China is big and strong, but she's in an abusive relationship. She can't beat up Eddie Guerrero while she's in this state, right? So what happens? It has to be someone bigger and stronger than China. Billy Gunn makes sense storyline-wise. He's coming back. He's friends with China. So let's make it happen, right? And that's what happened, motherfucks. And it worked out super duper well, right? It was memorable. And then Billy Gunn lost to Benoit, who's a friend of Eddie Guerrero's. All of these things made sense. It was all supposed to be part of a greater storyline on how to get the title from Eddie to Benoit while they're still in the Radicals 2.0, right? Eddie Guerrero has to drop it to someone. Benoit has to win it from someone. Who is a credible guy that could be the transitional champ between Guerrero and Benoit, right? Who is the credible guy that also fits into the story? Billy Gunn, right? That's how you do a good story. Nowadays, we don't have it anymore. Now the storyline is, oh, Jinder Mahal is afraid that Drew McIntyre has a sword named Angela. What the fuck? Nobody wants to watch that shit, you know? That's why the viewership is down, you know? It's not because wrestling's PG. You could do everything I said, you could do in PG, except maybe the abusive boyfriend, you could do something else, right? Like, and a cheating boyfriend. Everything else you could do in PG. They have boyfriends and girlfriends in PG wrestling, right? You could do all that. But nobody sits down to think about how the things that are happening on screen must connect logically to things of the past. That's when WWE started having accusations of like, oh, they don't follow through on storylines. And when something happens, it's like, what the fuck? For example, Randy Orton turning on Triple H and being a heel with Legacy, right? Like he explained, he's like, it's because you screwed me when we were in Evolution. That was pretty cool, but wouldn't it have been better if periodically Randy Orton showed signs of this? Or if Randy Orton went after other people that betrayed other people when he was a face, right? Basically, so then when it happens, you're like, oh, I thought you were over it. And he's like, I wasn't over it. Motherfuck. I planned the last 5 years of my life. And if you would see that when I helped this guy and when I did this, and everything could fall into place. That's what wrestling is. And as we've shown in the several examples that I've given, but more specifically in the Val Venis, Miro example, you need to have good storytelling. Characters have never been enough. They've never been enough. I don't know why people get so caught up on great, quote-unquote, great characters. To the point where they see something like Karrion Kross, who doesn't have a character, it's just a bunch of random elements thrown together. Oh, here, wear this skirt, this like Roman skirt. We're going to give you an hourglass to hold so you can say TikTok. None of that makes any sense, right? We're going to give you your valet. She's going to sing your theme song. No one knows why, right? You're going to be this creepy guy, but we're also going to show videos of you punching a heavy bag to show that you're tough. Good luck, kid. And then he goes out there like, again, my issue with Karrion Kross has never been Karrion Kross the guy. I'm sure he's a nice guy. It seems like he's invested in his character, you know? He might even be a good wrestler. You know, he might be good on promos. My issue is that people are, like, because of the guy, because the guy that's playing Karrion Kross, they like him for some reason. I don't even think he's that great personally, but they like him for some reason. They're like, Karrion Kross is a great character. Why is it a great character, though? What other interactions has this character had with other great characters? You take a look at Ryback when he was doing the bully gimmick, right? The concept there should have been someone that keeps getting bullied finally beats Ryback. Not, oh, Kalisto beats him. What the fuck does Kalisto have to do with anything? Because he's small? You know, it has to make sense. Characters that just operate on a different level, that just act in a different way, like Bray Wyatt, they need to fight people that are conducive to fighting Bray Wyatt. You need to come up with another character now that's going to rise up and beat him. And it can't be just John Cena the way he beat everybody else. It should be someone who's like, you are darkness and I am light. Like, it could have been, let's say, Shawn Michaels was around. That would have been a good fit, let's say, right? Bray Wyatt is like, darkness consumes everything. I'm a scary guy, right? And then Shawn Michaels is like, Bray, you know, I am a born-again Christian. You know, and I think I can help you. But he does it in a good way, so it doesn't seem as condescending. Lights go off, Bray Wyatt appears as the Fiend or whatever, grabs him, boom, Sister Abigail. Shawn Michaels is like, I'm not done with this guy. He attacked me, and then Bray Wyatt, let's say, pisses on a cross or something. Like, there's something really profane, right? That has to do with Michaels' character. Not something that extreme, but you know what I mean, right? Then Shawn Michaels is like, no, you can do whatever you want to me. You do not, you know, respect, you don't disrespect my God, right? And then it becomes this battle of good versus evil. And then Shawn Michaels wins and everyone's happy. Even the atheists, right? Like myself. Everyone's happy. So that's what I'm getting at, motherfuckers. There are several examples of this kind of storytelling that makes sense, and that's where the payoff in wrestling comes from. The payoff comes from, it didn't happen in this case, because it was the opposite, but the payoff comes from the slightly racist Texas billionaire or multimillionaire, JBL, losing to the immigrant Eddie Guerrero, not immigrant because he's born in America, but the Hispanic Eddie Guerrero, who he hates, right? That's what they try to do with Swagger and Del Rio. They try to do these things, but recently, and more so, these things have fallen flat because nobody is willing to put in the extra work to actually write out the story. You need to write out the story. You can't just, every episode should be an evolution of the story, and it has to make sense. Don't overuse these tropes of like, oh, the guy attacked his wife, so now the guy's really mad. No, fuck that. What is he going to do this week? And what's he going to do next week? What's he going to do in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks? And then the pay-per-view, the winner is declared and the storyline concludes. Right? So there you go, motherfuckers. This has been an educational experience with your boy, the Hater. So suck a fat